In our self-destructive age, it's often seen as a negative thing to be able to relate to children. It's seen as a negative and destructive thing to be able to relate to childhood. And I think that this is definitely interesting. Um, but that doesn't stop me from admitting that I can actually relate a lot to childhood. And there are many reasons for that. One of which is a desire to uncover an internal innocence that I once had, or that I believe that I should have. And so it's a way of identifying, it's a way of understanding, it's a way of interpreting. But to be specific, I feel like I can relate very well to street children. Granted, I have never actually worked with street kids. This is due to the fact that I've never been allowed to. My certain zeal and enthusiasm has never been appreciated by organizations. They have in fact stifled it and shut it down, and if it wasn't for my determination, I would have lost interest in this motif. I would have lost interest in this group of people, because I would have seen myself as being incapable of making a change, because this fire was stifled and was not seen, and the enthusiasm was destroyed in a sense. But that aside, I can relate to street children, and I would say that I can relate to street kids because they represent two things. They represent a dichotomy, and this dichotomy is that of innocence and yet that of abandonment. And I can relate to that because it's a really interesting feeling to be dislocated and yet to still embody some version of innocence, some version of almost uncorruptibility, in the sense that you are still good, that you are inviolable, that there are still many, many good things that you can offer the world despite your circumstances. And I know that it's unfair for me, who's always been privileged, who's maybe gotten close to being homeless a few times, but has always been for the most part privileged because I've never been on the streets. I've never struggled with homelessness. To be able to relate to street kids who have it really bad, whether this is street kids in developed countries such as America, or street kids in third world countries that are stricken by poverty. And I understand the complications of being able to relate to street kids in general, which is this unfair idea that like I'm somehow romanticizing this image. And I admit I do that a little bit. I'm not sure where this inspiration came from, though it's existed for a while now, for many years. Though I think Gav Roach and the introduction of Gav Roach from Les Miserables was part of it, or at least the beginning of it. But I want to be careful and say that I don't actually romanticize street children. In fact, I do the opposite. I think it's more just this thing that I relate to them. And I see them at a distance. And I see them at a distance because I've never had the chance to work with them. I've never had a chance to talk to them. So I don't even know what they're like. I don't know what their culture is like. They may not even be close to the image that I have in mind. They may not represent anything that I have in mind for street kids. But that doesn't mean that this image, this dichotomy that we have, or that I have in my mind of innocence and abandonment coexisting, doesn't actually exist. And I think that that's important to keep in mind. So the question you might be wondering is, why do I relate to street kids? And why would I continue to relate to street kids when I A, haven't worked with them, B, don't know exactly how they are and who they are, and C, am not really even making a difference in their lives? But it's because I feel like they embody something that is lost in our society. They embody something that's lost in our world. Granted, you can find corruption anywhere, so street kids are not above this. But I think for the most part, they don't really embody any negative traits, any negative stereotypes. Basically, you see people that are doing their best. So again, to go to literature, we think of Ragged Dick from Horatio Alger Jr.'s story, and stories of Ragged Dick, who was a homeless kid trying to make his way in America. And basically what you get out of this is this idea that the innocence is real, the effort is real, and the goodness is real. And I think that that's what I hold on to. So even though street kids, I shouldn't put them on a pedestal, and I shouldn't use them as some kind of justification for an ideal, I still feel like it's fair and it's reasonable in the sense that what I'm doing is I see them as a metaphor for strength amidst adversity. I see them as a metaphor for overcoming adversity. I see them as a metaphor for bravery and courage and all of these things that have been lost in society. In my life, I've had to face many disappointments, discouragements. I've had my heartaches and my heartbreaks. I've definitely had a lot of hard moments, but I nonetheless feel that this understanding of street children is important. That is why I identify as Phoenix the Street Kid. That is why that is my name in my book, The Street Kid, and in other books that I've written, because I think I'm a street kid at heart. And even though I have never embodied homelessness, I still embody the traits that I imagine in street children. And I think that that is something that should be respected simply by virtue of the fact that it exists and that it is my experience. And that even if I don't embody literal homelessness, that doesn't mean I don't embody a kind of homelessness, a kind of restlessness in this world that I do not understand and that causes a lot of pain for me, but that I nonetheless survive in, even if the circumstances are harsh, even if the conditions are harsh. I hope that you enjoyed this talk. This is Phoenix, and thanks.